My name is Katie and I've been working as a housemaid for a couple for about 2 years. It all started when I entered law school. I needed a job to pay for tuition and help out at home, so when a friend of my mother told me about a job opening as a maid, I didn't hesitate. I had my doubts about balancing work and studies, but necessity pushed me forward. My employers Clara and Enrique seemed like the perfect couple. She was a beautiful, successful woman, always busy with her business, and he was a serious businessman but always polite and cordial with me. The work was calm, and at first I was nothing more than a simple employee, invisible in the household routine. As time went by, I got used to the place. Their house was huge, but since Clara and Enrique were out most of the time, I had a certain freedom to organize things at my own pace. Enrique, however, always seemed to be around. Even though he was mostly quiet, he worked from home in his office, and sometimes we exchanged brief words when he came out to grab a coffee in the kitchen. At first everything was quite normal. He would ask me about school, how it was going, and I would respond politely without giving too many details. Occasionally he would make a comment about the weather or work, nothing out of the ordinary, but as the months passed I began to notice something different in his behavior. The occasional conversations became more frequent. He also started arriving earlier than usual just to be alone with me. He began watching me for longer periods, as if he were always waiting for the perfect moment to approach me. He would subtly compliment me, and always when his wife wasn't around, commenting on my dedication to my studies and how admirable it was that I could juggle everything. At first I thought he was just trying to be nice, but the intensity of these compliments started to make me uncomfortable. I remember one specific day, I was tidying up the living room when he appeared quietly and caught me off guard. "You must be exhausted, Katie, taking care of a house like this and still studying. Not everyone could do it," he said, smiling in a way that made me uneasy. There was something more to that smile, something I couldn't pinpoint at the time, but it began to happen more frequently. I tried not to think too much about it. I needed the job, and any problem there could mean having to find another one, which would be almost impossible in the middle of the semester. Even so, I began to feel the weight of every word and glance from him. Clara, on the other hand, didn't seem to notice anything. She was always too busy with her phone or endless meetings. One day, while I was cleaning their room, I found a letter that Enrique had written to Clara. I hadn't meant to read it, but one sentence caught my attention. "I feel like we're growing distant. Life seems so predictable." That stuck in my mind, and somehow I began to understand what was going on. Maybe he was unhappy in his marriage, and unintentionally I became a target of that frustration. The situation started making me nervous. Enrique was always around, always making a point to compliment something I did, or more subtly asking about my personal life. He wanted to know if I had a boyfriend, how I spent my weekends, and sometimes his looks said more than his words. I responded with the basics, not giving him much to work with, but the discomfort kept growing. One of the hardest moments was when he asked me to help organize his office. Clara wasn't home, and it seemed like an innocent request, but while I was there I felt him get too close, standing near me in a way that wasn't necessary. My senses were on high alert, and I tried to stay calm, reminding myself that I couldn't afford to lose that job. I didn't know how to act. On one hand, I needed that job. I couldn't risk being fired, but on the other, I didn't want to encourage Enrique's behavior. Completely avoiding contact with him was almost impossible, since he was always home every day. The weight of that situation grew heavier on me. One day, however, things changed. Clara left on a business trip, and I knew I would be alone with Enri for the entire week. I felt growing anxiety, almost as if I knew something was about to happen, and it didn't take long. On the very first day, he came to me in the kitchen, complimenting me again, but this time with a physical closeness that left no doubt about his intentions. I froze. I knew that if I said the wrong thing I could lose my job, but I also knew I couldn't allow this situation to continue. "Enrique, please respect me," I managed to say, trying to sound firm without being rude. He looked at me for a moment, surprised, then laughed as if I had said something amusing. "Relax, Katie, I'm just joking. You take everything so seriously." But I knew it wasn't a joke. He had crossed a line, and I couldn't ignore what was happening anymore. At that moment I realized I would have to make a tough decision. Spending that entire week alone with him seemed impossible. That was when one afternoon after his work he arrived with a bottle of wine and invited me to celebrate with him, saying he had achieved something at work. At first I played hard to get, but he insisted, saying he was my boss and wouldn't take no for an answer. He poured me a glass and pulled me to sit on the couch. I admit I was scared, but with each glass I relaxed a little more, and in the end, being involved with my boss didn't seem so terrible. Suddenly he moved closer and told me how much I sparked something in him, and without hesitation he kissed me. I couldn't resist and kissed him back. Maybe I would regret it later, but at that moment I stopped thinking. He led me to his bedroom, and there we gave into each other. It was unforgettable. That man was incredible. During the whole week we lived as if nothing we were doing was wrong. He came home with flowers, whispered sweet things in my ear, and even bought me costumes to wear for him. We took long baths together and made love like two Teenagers, but all good things come to an end. The week ended and his wife was coming back home. To my surprise, he asked me to keep working there and to never mention or show any sign of what had happened between us. I didn't even know how to deal with it. I had fallen for him, not realizing what lay ahead in the days that followed. I did everything I could to avoid being alone with Enrique. I organized my routine in such a way that I was always busy in different areas of the house. There was a constant tension of fear that he might try something again and his wife would catch us. I couldn't leave that job without having something else lined up. That's when I decided to tell my mother what was going on. I didn't give her many details, but I told her I was feeling uncomfortable at work and was thinking about finding something else. She supported me, but also reminded me how difficult it would be to find another job in the middle of the semester. The following week, I had already made my decision. I knew I needed space and that this situation couldn't go on. At the end of my shift, I asked to speak with Clara. I chose my words carefully, trying not to create a confrontational situation. I told her I was struggling to balance my studies with work and needed more time to focus on my college courses. To my surprise, Clara was understanding. She said she had always admired my dedication and understood my need to focus on my studies. She offered me a letter of recommendation and said I could count on her if I needed anything in the future. She mentioned my decision to her husband, and at the first opportunity he confronted me, refusing to let me leave. I told him I couldn't stay in their house anymore. It was getting too hard to hide what I was feeling. That's when he told me that what we had was just a fling, a bit of fun, and that life is very boring when it falls into routine. And with me, he broke away from that routine. That's when I realized I had been nothing more than a toy in his hands, and that he never considered leaving his wife despite being unhappy to be with me. I was shocked and felt used, but what I felt for him was too strong for me to hate him. I told him I wanted him all to myself, but he said he couldn't leave his wife because it would cause a scandal and bring financial damage to their business. With his decision made, I made mine. I told him I couldn't stay in such a dangerous and confusing situation anymore, that it was hurting me and I didn't know how much longer I could keep the secret. That's why I was determined to leave. He grabbed me forcefully and pinned me against the wall, and we made love again, taking a huge risk of getting caught, but it seemed like our bodies didn't care about the consequences. When we finished, I quickly got dressed, gathered my things, and left without looking back. I walked out of that house with a mixture of relief and sadness. I knew I was doing the right thing, but I also knew that my life would change from that moment on. Without that job, I'd have to work even harder to pay for college, maybe taking temporary jobs or cutting back on expenses. But the most important thing was that I left before being discovered. I didn't let the situation spiral further, and despite the challenges ahead, I kept my focus on my bigger goal, finishing college and building a career. A few weeks later, I received a message from him wanting to meet at a hotel. He said he missed my body, my scent. I confess those words shook me, and I wanted so badly to say yes. My body longed for him again, but at what cost? He would never truly be with me. I'd always be his escape, his second option. So I told him that we wouldn't see other again, and that if he contacted me again, I would send the messages to his wife. He tried to convince me that we didn't have to take things that far, that we could still have fun and enjoy ourselves without any risks, and that we had nothing to lose. It sounded tempting, but I knew where that would lead. Despite my overwhelming desire to see him, I had to pull myself out of the mess I had gotten into, one that was killing me. I never heard from him again. Now I'm in a relationship that truly fulfills me, with someone who loves me passionately and satisfies me, where I'm not treated like a toy. I'm happy, and my life is finally the way I always wanted it to be. My college is almost over, and I found a new job in my field.